The sort of crony capitalist public works and infrastructure rather than it go to the base.
The cost of imports, the cost of 2010 means that we are importing a huge amount of cement, a huge amount of steel, and yet we can see that in this country, the retail sector, the manufacturing sector, and the agricultural sector are suffering.
Without us knowing it really, this government has taken on, and also the banks here, debt, foreign debt. Now we started at apartheid with $25 billion in foreign debt, and it started inching up slowly, but the last couple of 3 years, it's gone to 80 billion, peaked at about 78 billion in last September. Taking on massive amounts of foreign debt is one quick way to solve that balance of payments problem, just taking on more money, but it means you have to pay the interest on that money plus the repayment of the capital in later years. And we don't really have the potential for export-oriented growth. And we have the biggest companies in this country now considered foreign direct investment. Anglo, Old Mutual, De Beers, SAB Miller, Investec, Didata, Monty, those are companies that are taking out profits, dividends, and interest forever.
None of this is sufficient to keep us away from the exigencies of this boom, of this bubble, because once it's burst, which it already has, it basically means that all of the social rhetoric and the socialist rhetoric of the state will be exposed. Whether or not the national health insurance comes into play, they're already being exposed. Whether or not the UIF fund is sufficient to bolster all of these people who are going to be angry, they are going to be exposed.
You are saying it's not just an economic crisis, Oupa. It's also an environmental crisis, because we have reached the limits, nature has reached the limits of a source of raw materials for economic activity, and it's reached its limits as a possible waste, a place where we can locate the waste products from our economic activity, which means we're going to have to rethink what we produce and how we produce. And what worries me is how we convey, how we unpack this lie that we've all been fooled into believing about the relationship between growth and poverty. I wouldn't call it a financial crisis or an industrial crisis at all. I would call it a civilizational crisis, because it's ultimately a crisis about values, and it's about the values of the capitalist values of greed and selfishness, which are behind our present situation.
How extreme is this economic crisis and the prospects for recovery? And how is a recovery possible, depending on the first answer about how extreme is the crisis? Now, if we look back historically with capitalism, neoliberalism was a response to the crisis of the early 70s, which was, the Keynesian approaches in most of Western Europe and to some extent North America as well. So you had a capitalist crisis based on Keynesian policies, which was then sort of responded to by capital through neoliberalism, which of course meant huge attacks on working class living standards and conditions and so on. And that was exported to most of the world.
The politics that we're pursuing has been so divided, divisive, and micro in orientation, and failed to link in possibilities of proletarian and, dare I say, lumpen proletarian unity, working class and poor people, linked between this alliance center-left that may now emerge with even a revived Keynesianism, perhaps, and the independent left. I think there is a fusion.